Hi, this is Lisa, and you are listening to I Love That Movie. This podcast is for movie lovers. It's not an unbiased opinion, it's not a straightforward review, it's just a couple people talking about a movie that they love. The format is each week I have a guest, and that guest and I discuss a movie that they love, something they're obsessed with, something they connect with. We'll talk about the plot, the director, and the actors, but we'll also talk about the personal connection my guest has with that movie. So if that sounds like something you want to listen to, keep listening. Hey, this is Lisa, and if you want to catch up with me on Twitter, you can find me at ILTM Podcast. I'm also on Instagram at I Love That Movie Podcast, and we have a Patreon. The show's always free, but if you want to support us on there, you can. It just helps keep the lights on. That's at patreon.com/. I Love That Movie. And if you sign up, you do get a a weekly bonus episode. Right now, we're covering all of WandaVision, but we've also covered The Mandalorian, and I have guests on there to discuss those episodes. And I do a weekly roundup of just everything else I'm watching. You guys always ask me what I'm watching, what I'm up to. Since it doesn't fit into this podcast, that goes on my Patreon. And I want to take a moment to thank my top patrons, and they are Chris Balga, Michael Cross, Philip Barker, and Jeff Widman. Thank you guys so much for keeping the lights on. And if you like what you hear today, please subscribe and rate this show. It does help new listeners find us. Well, I've got a new guest with me here today. I've got Cori. Say hi, Cori.
Hello there.
Hello. And Cori, since you are new to the podcast, would you mind kind of introducing yourself a little bit? Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, absolutely. So my name is Cori. I am mainly a new podcaster, starting listening to them a little bit, and now I'm actually going to get into creating my own. But I'm a very good avid listener of podcasts, so I love to find good podcasts, and I love to listen to them and engage in them. And this is my first time actually guest starring on one, so I'm very excited. I run a Instagram page, C2 Cosplay. I am one half of that page. It's mainly me and my partner showcasing my cosplay. And that's what I most likely focus on most times. But now I'm actually getting into expanding the page and trying out new things. So this is one of them. So I'm very excited to be here.
That's so cool. And I cosplay too, so I love your page, especially since it's so DC focused. All of the like Flash cosplays and Green Lantern. And then I saw you guys did Captain Marvel, like just all of it. It's really cool.
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite
Yeah.
things. Can't wait to actually get back to it.
Seriously.
We actually just shot some new content 2 days ago, so we're gonna actually start getting back into it. So pretty
Oh
excited about
man,
that.
I look forward to that. And like my husband and I, Nick, have cosplayed like, Wonder Woman and Flash together, but I'm always trying to get him to do more DC stuff.
Yeah,
He likes video games more, but I really want him to like make a Nightwing costume and stuff. I'm pressuring him. I want to do more of that. So I love couple cosplays, and I love the fact that it's DC. But we're talking about a movie. It's kind of related in some ways. I mean, it's based on a comic. What movie did you choose to talk about today?
I chose one of my all-time favorite movies in the world. It's called Josie and the Pussycats. Based
Yay! This is 2001. Yeah.
2001,
Go ahead.
based
Sorry.
based off the Archie comic books. I don't know how many people know about those, but it was something that I grew up with. Like I've been collecting Archie comic books since I want to say 6 years old at the least, and I'm in my 30s now. So, and I still do it today. So, it's one of my very good obsessions, and that movie was part of that obsession. So, I'm really excited to be talking about it today.
Yeah, so I'm aware that it's part of the Archie universe. It's kind of funny because now, you've got like Riverdale and like just, we've seen Josie and the Pussycats on that show, and you've got Sabrina and just like other stuff that's kind of part of that world. But when I watched this movie last night, I ended up also like watching an episode of the show too, like the kind of Hanna-Barbera ish show that came out, and that was like it kind of helped me understand a little bit more about the characters because I don't think that I ever grew up like reading them, but and then I started doing like image searches to like post about watching it, and it when I saw some of the cover art, especially like the newer comics, I'm like, I need to get a couple of these. Like it kind of seems like it's up my alley. So
Yes,
yeah, I'm kind of
absolutely,
excited to talk about it.
absolutely. Like the 1970s show, it's so funny because it's actually the show that I keep on when I'm going to work when I leave in the morning for my dog.
Oh,
Cause,
that's
cause,
awesome.
cause I have to, cause I have to like I'm gone like 10 hours a day from the apartment, and I have to have something on to keep my dog entertained, and he's very much entertained by that, which is the craziest thing ever.
That's so funny you say that because I actually do the same thing. Like, well, right now I'm working from home, but when I used to leave, we would turn on like Animal Planet or something. Like, we'd
Right?
find something that we feel like the dog's connected with, and we'd play that while we're gone. And it actually worked. Like, they used to get very upset when we would leave. But if we turn the TV on, it sounds kind of mean, but it kind of tricks them into thinking we're going to sit back down on the couch, so they just kind of chill. But they
I
enjoy
can
that.
segue. I can segue from that for a minute. I got a funny story to tell you. I had to actually leave
Oh,
that.
go for it.
I had to actually leave that show on today. The Josie the Pussycat show on because we was me and my fiance were out today because it was our anniversary. So we were out celebrating our anniversary, and I had to leave it on. But we have the dog camera to be able to watch them from our phones.
Yes.
And when it was so funny. We were out having dinner, and I turned on the camera, and I had the show on, like where it was, and he was literally watching the show, like literally sitting there watching the show, which was
That is so
the
cute.
funniest thing. It's the funniest thing I've ever seen him do since we got him. I'm like, oh my god,
Hap-
this dog is literally sitting here watching the TV.
He's used to his routine. Well, happy anniversary too. That's great.
Thank you so much.
So, segueing, I guess, into the talking about the movie. So this came out in 2001, and I do want to say before we jump too much further into it, we do give spoilers on this show. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, I do recommend you watch it. I actually watched it on HBO Go, or HBO Max. So if you have that, you can watch it on there as well as the cartoon. But I'm gonna go ahead and read the synopsis really fast, and then we'll kind of dive into it a little bit more.
And
Uh,
side note, it's actually on sale right now on
oh, really?
Voodoo too. So anybody that hasn't seen the movie but is interested in it, like after we talk about it, like it's on sale right now. So go get it, Voodoo.
There you
Josie
go.
Pussycats.
You have no excuse. Okay, so here is the synopsis. Josie, Melody, and Val are three small town girl musicians determined to take their rock band out of the garage and straight to the top, while remaining true to their look, style, and sound. They get a record deal, which brings fame and fortune, but soon realize they are pawns of two people who want to control the youth of America. They must clear their names, even if it means losing fame and fortune. I think one thing about this movie, I remember when it came out because it came out like I think I graduated in '02, so I was like 17 when this came out, and um I didn't realize that it was like satire. Like that it was like a comedy. And I think I probably would have like I didn't see it at that age, and I think I would have had I known that.
Yeah, because I didn't really know what satire was back then because I was pretty young. I'm like, I think I was 10 years old when this came out. So the only reason I knew about it when it came out is because I read the comics. Like I was like really into the comics, so I'm looking like this
Oh.
is actually my like being 10 years old at the time. I didn't know anything about like them basing movies off of like things like books and stuff. So I was just like just watching the movie, and I was like, oh my god, I recognize kind of like how they look, and this looks like the people that's in my comics. So I'm not really sure what's going on. So that was my whole thought of being so young watching it, being so young when it
Well,
came
that
out too.
makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Yeah. I also on this part of the show, I usually do a couple of quick facts. I've only got one that I wrote down from looking through like the IMDb trivia, but I thought it was interesting. It said due to the level of profanity, adult themes, the family-friendly Archie comics, which published the original Josie and the Pussycat stories, would denounce the film and discourage people from seeing it. Strangely, many years later, the comics would not only be fine with it, but would promote the series Riverdale, based on the Archie stories, which arguably has a much darker theme than its storylines in this movie.
That's a really interesting fact because because I can tell you one fact about when I went to go see this movie. This was actually during a time where they actually like had two different like showings in the movie theater. So my mother actually
Oh,
so
yeah.
my mother actually took me to the family friendly showing of this movie. So for years, like I promise you, for years, if I was 10 years old when this came out, for years, at least 7 6 7 years, I did not know what the real version of the movie was. So I didn't get to see the real version of the movie till I was in actually high school, actually, with all the dirty jokes and the profanity and all that. In it.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. So you have like a totally different remembrance of this film.
Right? 'Cause I'm looking like
Because
yes,
yeah.
because I'm looking like even like the family friendly version is like some of the words that were in the movie. I'm like I probably wouldn't say being 10 years old. So I'm looking like maybe this is a little bit like inappropriate. But after I saw the real version, I'm like okay, this is totally like way inappropriate, over the top.
Yeah, and like, thinking back to 2001, I completely understand the headspace of being like, let's make this family friendly. It's associated with Archie, and Archie was like just really pure, Americana. Like, I understand why they were concerned about that image, but it seems like I don't know. I guess like after The Dark Knight, like with anything with comics, like the possibility of there being like a darker, more adult version suddenly became kind of more mainstream. And I guess that's why now with like Riverdale, they're not so worried about how that comes across anymore. And I also feel like the newer Archie comics, including like the ones about Archie and his friends, they've gotten a lot like more modern and like they're kind of trying to reach like the youth of today with some of their themes about inclusion and just being a little bit more purposeful about it being, I think, a little bit more set in our times. At least just from the ones that I've kind of browsed through at a comic shop. So maybe that's they've just kind of rebranded and found that people are more accepting of that kind of stuff now.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think they even added a LGBT character in it a few years ago before Riverdale even came out. So yeah,
Yeah, I think I know for sure like Jughead is supposed to be Ace in the comics too, I think.
right.
And that's something that they don't write in a lot of comics. I think they do now, but back when before the show came out, and I remember even when the show came out, people were a little bit upset that he wasn't Ace in the show because there's so little representation for people that are Ace. But um, yeah, so it seems like they've kind of veered away from just being strictly a certain branding and just kind of being a little bit more open to interpretation with their characters, which I think is a good thing because you can kind of, have something for everybody. And nothing wrong with the PG version, I'm sure. I haven't personally seen it, but yeah,
I still have
it's
it on V.
interesting.
I still have it on VHS.
On VHS, nice. I have some VHS still, but they're at my dad's house.
It even says like family friendly on the bottom, which is so funny because I have like
That is so
the
funny.
family friendly VHS, but then I have like the DVD that's like totally like the real version of the movie, which like I said, I got the DVD when I was 16, 17 years old, and that was the real version.
Interesting. So you mentioned a second ago you're like this is back when they did this. Were there other films like I don't remember this. Were there other movies that had like a family-friendly version in the theaters? Or is this like a one-time thing?
I don't really know because I know it was like during the early to mid 2000s. It's like that's when comedy movies actually started getting like really like raunchy and stuff. So I'm not sure if any other comedy movies actually did it, but I do remember distinctly that this was like one of the movie theaters that I went to. I don't remember which one it was, but it was back when I actually lived in Dallas. But it was one of those movie theaters that had like different screens, like at least 15, 16 screens. So they
Mhm.
like doubled the movies on some of them where they actually were like a little bit edited, and then like they had the real version going on. other places.
Interesting. Well, Texas is like, part of the Bible Belt, so maybe maybe it depended on which state you
R-
were in. And I
Right.
say that as living in Texas. So maybe that had something to do with it, but that would be interesting to find out if there were other movies like this cuz I thought that was such an interesting concept. Okay. So, uh I will also say when I saw this last night, it reminded me of some other movie that I really liked, and it made sense when I looked at the IMDb. This is directed by Deborah Kaplan and Harry Elfront, and they directed Can't Hardly Wait, which was like
I
a
know.
favorite of mine.
Isn't that crazy? Because like I promise you, like I couldn't put my finger on it like for years. I'm like, what other movie does this remind me of? This reminds me of some movie. And then one day when I was in my 20s, I was in my 20s, like watching cable, probably back in college or something. But Can't Hardly Wait was actually on TV. I'm looking like, wait a minute, this looks really similar to something else. And then
And Seth Green's in
right.
it.
And I'm looking like I said, okay, then I watched Josie and the Pussycats again. I watched the movie like a million times because I just can't stop watching it. But I'm like, okay, this looks similar. And then I found out it was the same directors. I actually think those directors, the two that you mentioned, I think they actually collaborated together. Like they were partners, right?
Yeah, I think so because they wrote and directed Can't Hardly Wait, and I think that's why they got Josie and the Pussycats. I feel like that was successful, so they were given this project. But yeah, it seems like they're like a team.
Right. Yeah. It would make sense
Yeah.
that they did both of those movies.
Yeah, and what's funny too, and I'm just gonna admit this to you, when I was a teenager, I was kind of a brat, and so I was like all the like famous teen movies, like She's All That and stuff like that. I thought I was too good for. I was like, this isn't real cinema. Like I was just stuck up. Okay, no nice way to say it. But then when I got a little older and I was in my 20s, I kind of went back and saw some of these teen movies, and Can't Hardly Wait is like one of my favorites actually. But I didn't see it till later, so um because that's so near and dear to my heart, I was like, yeah, when I was watching this last night, I was like, man, that's so similar to that film. It also kind of reminded me a little bit of, and Eugene Levy's in this. It kind of reminded me a little bit of, he has like a troupe that he's in. There's a couple movies they've done, like Dog Show is one of them. It's like a comedy troupe. It's several actors, and the humor, and Parker Posey's in that too.
I cannot
So it
believe
kind
that.
of
Yeah.
reminded me,
Yeah.
yeah, of like
Eugene
that.
Levy shows up in everything. Doesn't it seem
He
like it?
does, he does, especially
Yeah.
around this time, like late 90s, early 2000s. He was literally in everything. But he and Parker Posey are in some of those other films that kind of group did together. I'm not sure what you call the group. I need to look it up. But the humor in this reminded me of that. So it feels like there must have been some collaboration with that as well, or
I would
some input from Eugene or something,
I would
because
totally agree
it
with that.
reminded me of
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Well, looking back on this too, this has like a really, now famous cast. Something I didn't realize until I was watching it last night.
It's just yeah, it's crazy how okay they had like a really famous cast for the time I would say, but it's like some of them stayed relevant after the fact,
True.
and then some of them kind of fell off. I would say
For sure.
I would say out of the three from the actual Pussycats, Tara Reid and Rosario Dawson and Rachel Lee Cook. I think Rosario Dawson is the one that had like the longevity of all three of them.
Oh yeah. I mean, especially now that she's Ashoka Tano.
Right.
Ahsoka Tano, yeah. Like, with now that Rosario Dawson's in Star Wars, I mean, yeah, her her career is set. But Rachel A. Cook was, hugely important around this time, and so is Tara Reid. I mean, they would have been considered really big stars at the time. You know, um,
Tara Reid, yeah, I would say like late '90s, like early 2000s was like the Tara Reid kind of era for for like the comedy movies.
yeah, for sure. I think American Pie, yeah, had just happened 1999, and then I always forget that she was in The Big Lebowski. She's Bunny.
I know she's
But
Bunny. She's. I keep every single time I watch the movie, I keep forgetting that she's in it. Like, oh my god! And
I know she looks like a baby in that movie.
she
She's
even
so young.
she even had a small part in Cruel Intentions. That's crazy.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, and I'm seeing too Urban Legend. Wow. Yeah, she was like a big star. I actually last night tweeted that, and this is kind of a little bit of a tangent, but she was definitely one of the stars that later just the tabloids were so ugly to her. And I remember I was pretty young at the time when all that was happening, like a lot of really negative stuff about her having plastic surgery, about her partying too much. You know, she sort of that era, I think, with like Paris Hilton and um, I think somebody else even in the tweet mentioned like Lindsay Lohan, where people are just like so ugly about them, like, oh, she's washed up, she's this and that. And looking back on it, I'm like, that was terrible. Like, she didn't really do anything to deserve that other than I guess she partied too much and got older. Like, I don't know why that was so okay back then, but just want to say shout out to Tara Reid. She was in a lot of good stuff, and I liked her. And she's in the Sharknado
I
movies
say
now.
she got
So,
she like had a career resurgence from the
yeah,
Sharknado films.
yeah. So she's got that. And then Rachel Leigh Cook, I don't feel like. I mean, she was so big, but I don't feel like I see her as often anymore. I saw
Wasn't
she does a lot of like voice
correct me if
work.
I'm wrong. Wasn't she like before even she's all that? Wasn't she in like the Babysitters Club? Wasn't she one of them?
Oh my gosh, I loved that movie. Let me look.
I want to say she was the short haired girl. I don't remember their names off
You
the
know
back.
what? That might have been. That wasn't Christina Ricci, was it? Let me look.
I don't know. Everybody looks so similar back when they were younger.
I know they did. Okay, I'm going back into the 90s. I'm gonna find this. 26 Summer Street. I don't see it, but let's find out who's in the Babysitters Club because I loved that film and the books.
Oh, I love the
I
books.
like forgot about that movie.
I my library card wore out from from those books in elementary school.
Okay, let's see. Nope, you were right. It is her.
It's her, right?
It came up right away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
I
know why it didn't come up in IMDb,
I
but
don't know. I figured.
it's definitely
I know.
her.
I'm like I knew I seen her in something before She's All That. I'm looking like She's All That was like her big role, but she was in something else before that.
Oh, actually, yeah, I think I just didn't scroll down far enough. I think it's her first movie. Good
Oh
memory.
wow.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I used to get her and Lacey Shaber. I don't know if
Oh,
that's how you
Lacey
say her
Shake,
name, but
the girl from Party of Five.
yes, I used to
Yeah.
get them like confused because they're both like really small, had short hair. But yeah, they were really big stars at the time that this movie came out. And then you've got Alan Cumming, who like the second I saw him, I was like, oh, remember how he was in Romy and Michelle's high school reunion? And he even has a line in the movie that kind of calls back to that. I can't remember what he says, but he says something that's sort of a reference to that film. I mentioned Parker Posey's in this.
Yeah, I could not believe Parker
Eugene
Posey was in it.
Levy.
I'm like I went like my mother took me to go see Scream 3 when I really wasn't supposed to be going to
Oh
go see it,
yeah.
and I remember she was in that movie. I'm looking like
I feel it.
right.
y- Yeah, I feel like all parents are like, you can't see this, and then for some reason, they always make an exception for like one or two horror films, like, and then you look back and you're like, why was that okay, but not that okay? Um, yeah, and then also, let's see, I could not remember this woman's name last night, and I'm gonna look and see if this is her. Okay, Missy Pyle. I recognized her too. She
Yes,
was in like a ton of stuff. Like,
she was one of the big ones. I would say in the 2000s.
yes, you know, Dodgeball was what I always think of her first. But then she was like in Galaxy Quest
I don't know.
and like a bunch of other stuff.
I always think about her when I think about her. I always think about when her and Queen Latifah had that fight in that movie. What was that movie with Queen Latifah and Stephen Martin? Oh my god.
Let's see.
I'm gonna have to click on Missy Powell's name there because I have to know the name of that movie now.
Okay, yeah, tell me because I can't remember, but I'm sure when you say it, it'll
Oh
jump
my
to my
gosh,
mind.
I have to scroll down so far. She's been in so much stuff.
I know she's like one of those people that when I was watching the movie last night, I was like, "Oh my gosh, her. What's her name?" Like, she was in so much stuff around this time specifically too. But it looks like she's
Bringing down the
still.
house. That's what it's called.
Oh, okay, okay, yes.
Yeah.
She's so funny. Yeah, so, like, a really good cast of comedians, and, like, granted, when I saw this and when you saw this, I probably did not know all those names, but it's fun to go back and, like, see all this, and then I mentioned earlier Seth Green too, and, the guy from Scrubs as
Donald
well,
Faison. Oh my gosh. Yes.
yes, a and then Breckin Meyer also, uh
Oh, the other one from the drawer, right?
yeah, he was in, like, Clueless and a lot of other stuff, but
I
then,
know.
I think
I
he's had a
remember he was in
bigger.
Clueless. Yeah, I do remember he was in Clueless.
Yeah, and I think he's had kind of a bigger presence, like, on TV, like, with, like, Robot Chicken and, there's, like, another show he's in, but I Franklin& and Bash, that's the other thing that I was thinking of, but he was, like, really in a lot of teen movies that I remember back then too. So this was, like, a lot of famous people that, kids at the time would be familiar with, but then also, like, the older
Even a couple
crew.
of cameos from people. Like
Oh, that's
I
true.
think Carson Daly was in it, and that's when TRL was like really hot.
Yes, TRL was, like, very important to me at that time. I watched it every day. And I mean, yeah, wow, that's just such a throwback. That was like, the good old days back when MTV was, like, so incredibly important in all the music videos and stuff you saw
When MTV was
there.
actually about the music.
Exactly, yeah. I wasn't gonna say it, but you're right.
I have no problem
Well,
saying
so
it.
thank you. So we've kinda talked a little bit about the cast. Do you wanna tell us about some of your favorite scenes from the movie?
Oh my gosh, where do I even start? Like my favorite, I think one of my favorite things is actually just like the opening intro where all the fans are going crazy over the Jor. And it's like, and then like they come off the plane and like, oh my gosh, immediately I recognize three of the guys already. I'm looking like, oh my gosh, these guys are like famous on TV and like in other movies, and like girls just going
Mhm.
crazy over these guys. It's like I think that's one of my favorite things in the movie.
I agree. I love their name, and also how, like, in the movie, they keep saying they don't know what it means, or they try to interpret it different ways when really it's like it means, like, of the day, like soup du jour. I like that the name of the band, and then these guys, like you said, they were very, like, popular around this time, so it's just really fun to see them as this kind of spoof on, like, the boy bands of the era, like, probably maybe this is gonna make me sound old, I'm gonna pick the wrong band names because this was so long ago, but, like, NSYNC and stuff like that. Um, they're sort of parodying off that, and this whole movie is kind of parodying, the sort of like the pop music of the time, but not, like, in a mean way, still, like, in a fun way. And I kinda like that because I actually really like pop music a lot, so
So do
I
I.
I don't like it when. Yeah, and I don't like it when it's so hated on, like, people are like, "Ugh, it's not real music," and I'm like, "I think it is," and so I feel like they do a good job in this movie of, like, Josie and the Pussycats, they have a poppy sound, but they make a point in the movie of, like, this is authentically who they are until the record label, like, takes over, and I think it's probably hard for people today that didn't grow up in this time to understand, like, the weight of, like, the record store they go to, the record labels, because I feel like so much about the music industry has changed, but, I think at this time in history, people kinda saw these bands as sort of, like, almost like a factory that was, like, pumping out new artists. So yeah, it's interesting to go back and watch this and think about the headspace at that time of, like, the way people saw the music industry. But there were so many movies about music actually around this time because, there's also, like, Empire Records, and which we've talked about on the show, and let's see, a couple others that we've talked about, and the names are going to escape me because, my memory's terrible, but like Almost Famous and stuff like that. Like, there was, like, a bunch of, like, music movies around this time too.
Yeah, I totally agree.
But yeah, I like that opening scene a lot. I like their outfits and, like, the way the fans are going crazy and stuff. I completely agree.
And I don't know, it's the whole movie is just it's filled with so many iconic things. I think the one scene that actually like I actually memorized even by heart is like when Josie finally figures out that she's being like subliminally brainwashed and she agrees to go on with the concert and then all of a sudden this Jor pops up out of nowhere to come save
Yes, I
them.
was glad they weren't dead.
Right.
I was really worried for them.
And then they can't take them on because they're like all casted up and so here we go with Melanie and Valerie's my memory escaped me, yeah. Melanie and Valerie's about to start fighting and then here come Fiona and Josie starting to go at it. Which I gotta say one thing, Tara Reid really surprised me as Melody in that one scene right there because I'm looking like this girl, like she might be sweet, but she's kicking some butt.
Oh yeah, I like when she finally gets to like showcase her fighting skills because in the movie she kind of reminds me of Amanda Seyfried's character in Mean Girls a little bit. Just like a little dazed and like a little spacey, which I watched the cartoon last night and I guess Melody's always kind of like that, like a little bit goofier, a little bit ditzier. But she's got some really good moments in this. I would say overall I was kind of impressed with Tara Reid in this role
This
actually.
this is a fun fact for me. This is actually the first movie I've ever seen Tara Reid in. So I was
Oh
under,
man, that would have set the bar high then.
so I was really under the impression that this is all this is the only kind of rose that she knew, the spacey kind of loopy blonde rose. So like
Mhm.
I didn't see American Pie until like years later because I just didn't see I didn't get into the craze back then. So when I saw her in American Pie later on, I was like, okay, now she's this serious kind of high school chick that wants to be serious in a relationship. I'm like, okay, so this girl's like really dynamic, but it did set the bar high for me to see her in Josie and the Pussycats, to see her acting like this sweet, spacey little girl, which is kind of cute for the time, and I still think it's cute even when I watch it today.
Yeah, and she's got a lot of really good moments, like, a couple of moments where laughed out loud at the stuff she said, when when she's in the shower and one of the, du jour guys, leaves a message for her on the mirror and she screams, but then she just, like, writes a little smiley face, like, it doesn't really like, register to her that it's a warning. I thought that was really funny. Um, and then also when, so that part, and then also when, actually, the scene you're talking about with the car, when Josie says, "If I could go back in time, I'd change everything." And Tara goes, or Melody goes, "If I could go back in time, I'd try to talk to Snoopy." I lost it. I thought
You
that
know
was
what?
really
I
funny.
laughed. I laughed at that when I laughed at that when I was 10 years old. I laughed at that when I was in high school. But as a grown adult, I actually really appreciate that line because I'm looking like, oh my gosh. Because even what Josie said to her after that was like the truth as an adult. I'm looking like, I love that you think that everything is possible and the world is such a great place because Lord knows we need that right now. And
Very
I
true.
love that moment. I love that moment as an adult. It's like an appreciating moment for that scene right there and that particular interaction with them.
And also, when you find out that the voice that, is the subliminal voice on the track is the movie phone guy, I lost it. I thought that was hilarious because movie phone, I mean, that's another thing that's, like, gone away, but that was such a big deal
It's
back then.
and it's such a weird
I
it's such a weird thing because it's like even before we went to go see this movie in the theaters, I'm looking like my mom actually had to call to see what time it was showing.
Yep.
It's the exact same voice. Like, oh my gosh, you hear
Yeah.
this voice. We literally just heard this voice, and then I'm hearing this voice in the theater. I'm looking like, oh my gosh, I think I even shook my mama. I'm like, Mama, that's the voice that you hear on the phone. And of course, I'm too young to know that I shouldn't be talking in the movie, so she tells me to shush. But
Aw.
so I got
Good
so,
mom.
so I got a little too excited, but it was like crazy. It's like, oh my god.
Yeah, cause like, so when we were watching it last night and that part happened, cause I was like, "I recognize that voice," but it's been a long time, right, since I've used movie phone. And then he said that, and I went, "Oh my gosh!" Like Nick and I started laughing, and we were both like, if you know the name of the movie that you want to see, press one now. Like we were like, oh my gosh. Like I remember because of where I live, like the movie theater that I would always select when I heard that guy's voice, Webb Chapel Road and LBJ. Like I'm sure everyone like remembers like the exact road of the movie theater you would go to, but um just such a throwback. So this whole movie is kind of like a time capsule that way, especially where I was at the time. But like for me. So I think that iconic movie phone. I mean, we don't use movie phone anymore, so it's just interesting that that part is in there. And it goes along with the theme of like all the advertising because I also we actually talked about this in when we were talking about another movie recently, but like I don't know if you remember this, might have been too young to remember this, but there was like this distinct fear around this time of like advertising taking over and like, oh no, there's ads everywhere, there's too many billboards, people were
I
like
was
really
probably too
worried
young.
about
I
that.
probably was too young for that.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm looking like
You're
I
lucky. It was really silly, but like they were like, "Oh no, like children are being advertised to too much, subliminal messages." Like this was like a real concern that like completely went away. Now we're like advertised to all the time by our phones and everywhere we look and we don't even care, but it was like a legit concern back then.
I'm looking like
So I think that movie's playing on that a little bit.
that's crazy that that was a real big concern back then. When I and now
Yeah.
fast forward to 2021, 20 years later, I cannot believe this movie came out 20 years ago. That's insane. But
It is. It's real crazy. Especially well, me being a little bit older like 2001, I'm like, that's 10 years ago. No, it wasn't. It was 20 years ago. But yeah, it's like we went from being so afraid of like advertising to like
to now,
sitting next to an echo,
iPhone,
that listens to everything I say.
literally our phones can hear us, and then next thing you know, we see an Instagram ad on what we were just talking about.
And we're like, oh, well, that's normal.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
just yeah, that's so
Yeah.
great.
The concerns did not make an impact. But yeah, so I had to mention that because I was thinking about that during that scene. But what's another iconic scene that you really liked?
I don't know. I just think that the changing of the trends gag in the whole movie was is what got me too. It's like even watching it as a teenager, like how all of a sudden everybody's wearing blue at one point, and then all of a sudden it's pink, and
Yes.
then it's orange, and then I think by the end of the movie, everybody's wearing leopard. Even Josie's wearing leopard at one point. But it's like she got brainwashed to the point where she's actually following the trends as well. It's like
I was I was definitely one of the teens that was trying to match every trend possible. But yeah, in this movie, that part is really funny. I also like the part where like Melody is like, "I want a Big Mac" after she like listens to that song, and they're like, "Aren't you vegetarian?" And she's like, "Yeah, but now I want a Big Mac." And like in their hotel, there's all that Target stuff everywhere. In Melody's hotel, there's all that McDonald's stuff everywhere. So it's like kind of ironic because they're sort of criticizing advertising, but then this whole movie has like a million sponsors. I just think that's really funny.
and I also do love the scene where I think it's at one point the beginning of the movie where they're not famous yet, and like they have these girls that's like bothering them
Oh yeah.
and bullying them, and then later on when they get famous, um, number one, I thought it was so crazy that all that happened in a week. I was right along with Josie when they climbed up to the top of the charts. I'm like,
Yeah,
wow.
she goes, "What if they don't like us?" And he's like, "We'll just replace you." And you're like, "Oh."
But then like they open the door and then like it's the same girls that was bullying them in the beginning and they're dressed like them now, which is
I did not even notice that.
I died. I totally died laughing at that whole part. It's like, oh my gosh. And then like I found out later on because I told you, like I said, I seen a family friendly version of this movie. I found out later on that that scene was actually extended to the point where they it was a part where Wyatt said that getting revenge on your bullies is like the best part. He said like kissing your ass or something. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never heard this part of the movie ever. It's like it was such a privilege just to go just to see the full part of the movie, the full version of the movie.
Yes. Well, you commented on the trends. I have to say, like, watching this is definitely like a time capsule too, because for me because when we were watching it, I was like, I had a shirt like that. I had a shirt like that. Like I was like, oh my gosh. And like some of it like genuinely makes me cringe now, but it's probably gonna come back because I feel like the '90s are back and the 2000s are not far behind. I think we will see a lot of this fashion again, but I'm at the point now too where it's so far away that I can look at it fondly. And like specifically, Josie's hair, I definitely tried to have that haircut at that time. Um, that would have been I think maybe at the time I had a pixie cut, but then later I tried to grow it out and have it feathered like that. Like every girl tried to have that haircut, I think, around then.
I I vaguely remember around that time every older girl I knew wanted to have their haircut.
Yeah, it was like it got to a point where it was like a bit much. Like you and all your friends had the same haircut. It was like, okay, one of us has to get a different haircut. But yeah, it was very big at the time. Um, yeah.
And
Uh,
it's so funny because like I think they had an official website where they were actually like they were actually advertising them as a band at the time. Like on a this this was
oh,
when AOL was like the biggest thing ever.
oh
Oh
my
my gosh,
gosh.
AOL. Oh my god, AOL dial up. I can't even deal right now. But this is when AOL was like the biggest thing, and I used to go on their website because you can listen to the soundtrack on their website, and I had
What
this
a treat.
I had I had a feature on they had a feature on AOL where you can download where you can save pages offline where you can listen to it without being on the internet. So
Oh my
I
gosh.
saved the page and I used to listen to that soundtrack all the time because I just love the music out there. That's the other favorite thing I like about the movie. I like the music out there. It's like songs that I still sing today, like in my
One
head.
of my friends, Stacy, said she listens to this soundtrack all the time to this day too.
I promise you, like you know how vinyls are coming back. If they put it on vinyl, I would totally buy it right now. I wouldn't even
There you go.
hesitate.
That's great. Let's see. Was there another scene that you wanted to kind of touch on?
I think what did you think about the fake TRL appearance?
That
That was a scene that really stuck out to me too.
Yeah, that caught me off guard. They went there and they were like, everything's fake, and I was like, oh, are they trying to say like MTV's fake? Like I didn't get it at first, but then Carson and the other guy like try to kill them. I was like, what's happening? It's hard seeing Carson Daly be mean. I just can't. And what's interesting? Oh, go ahead.
I thought the most ironic thing about that whole scene was this is like around the time where I think Tara Reid and Carson Daly were married. I think so. So it was
Yes, I
crazy.
was reading about
So it was
that.
crazy seeing them in that dynamic because they even made a joke. They even like made a joke where he's still trying to like go after her, but he was like, if I wasn't really into this whole conspiracy to like make music this subliminal message thing, we could totally like date. And then Melody's like, really? And then she knocks him off the balcony. Is like I ever date a guy like you. I'm like, that's so ironic because y'all are dating at the time.
Yeah, isn't he with someone from that time now?
I
Maybe
believe,
not.
I believe so. Like, I don't keep up with people's dating life.
That's probably a good thing. But I feel like or maybe he dated Sarah Michelle Gellar, or I might be thinking of a different guy,
I
but
think he actually did before Freddie,
yeah.
maybe.
So shamefully, around the time of this and after, I definitely followed a lot of the tabloid blogs, so that's the only reason why I know that. Not doing that so much today, but I have intel from around that time because of that. But yeah, he was like he was so huge at this time. Like it's hard to I mean, he was like the most important, I guess, journalist that kids were, interested in for sure. MTV was just so freaking cool at this point. Like
I mean,
it's nothing can compare to it.
at least he stayed relevant since then. 'Cause I know that
He
because
did.
doesn't he does the voice now, right, as a correspondent?
Yeah, I believe so. I feel like he's always had work. Like he's always been able to kind of stay in the scene for sure.
Yeah,
But yeah, that wouldn't surprise me.
right.
Um when you're kind of talking about stuff that stands out to me, also when they're like in the record store, man, like I remember, here in Dallas we had a Tower Records,
Oh my god,
and I would go in there.
I used to love going to Tower Records. Oh my god, I cannot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would go in there like all the time and like put headphones on. Like you had to go put headphones on, listen and pick a CD. Now that was like the fancy way to do it. The other way is you could go to Walmart and they also had headphones, but it wasn't quite as reliable, not as many options. If you wanted like the good stuff, quote unquote, you had to go to the
it was
mall
a place. It
to
was a
listen
place
to
I
that.
went to. It was a place. It was a record store my auntie used to take me to in Dallas every week, every weekend. I think
Oh
I
man, do
just
you remember what it was
I
called?
think it was called CD Warehouse. It was like a
That sounds
it was
familiar.
a tiny it was a tiny place, but it had buku amount of CDs. I think most of the CDs were either reused or refurbished. But like no, this like this trumped Tower Records in my opinion because they used. I promise you, they would take the CD out. They would let you look at the insert while you're listening to the song, and
Ooh,
they had stools for you to sit on while you're listening to them. So you can have like the whole
nice.
experience. Like it was my favorite place to go to just to listen to the music, and then like if you like it, then you buy it after listening to
That
the
is
whole
so
thing.
cool.
Then, yeah,
Now we have Spotify, but back then, very important. Yeah,
but that
and I
was one of
kinda
my
miss that.
experiences.
I
Yeah.
miss doing stuff like that.
Right. I actually miss going to record stores, like doing stuff like that. That was like a good experience. I It was like one of the best parts of my childhood, I would say.
Right, it's kind of like, growing up, I spent a lot of time at, like, Borders and Barnes& and Noble just hanging out, looking at books, and record stores were really a lot like that, where you could just hang out, listen to music, and I think also when you're younger, you just have so much more free time to listen to more music than you do when you get older, so it's like, it makes me nostalgic. Whenever I see any movie where they're in, like, a record store or a video store, I'm like, "Oh, man, those were some good times for sure."
Definitely. Uh, like I said, this movie brings back so much nostalgia as far as like even like I know we have probably a good age difference, but I think we can relate on the nostalgia of this movie and what we did when we were that age.
Oh, for sure, absolutely. Um, I think the other thing I appreciate in this movie, I mentioned earlier Parker Posey. I like that, like, no matter what role she's in, she, like, acts the hell out of it. And this role as Fiona is like so over the top. But then at the same time, I mean, she did it for the wrong reasons. But when she's got that reveal of like she was not popular and no one liked her, and then Alan Cumming is like, "Me too," and I'm like, that's kind of sweet. Like, I'm good with that.
It's so
I'm
crazy
good
too.
with
It's
it.
so crazy because the scene when they went to the record party when they was in the Fiona's suite, I guess it kind of almost alludes to the fact that maybe Fiona wasn't as popular as she is now because she kind of wants to. You can kind of see that she kind of wants to be like Josie a little bit with what she's saying.
Yes.
So it's crazy that that scene kind of alludes to it, and then the funny part for that very scene for me after they leave Fiona's presence, and I guess Valerie says that Fiona's a freak, and then Melody says, "I'm so glad you said something because I got a chill up my spine when you said her name." It's like it almost gives me this like feeling that maybe Valerie and Fiona have this like same kind of spirit that
Mhm.
maybe that's why Melody kind of seen something was off and maybe they didn't.
Yeah. Also, there was that joke where she's like, "I have a chill up my spine." They're like, "You're sitting on an ice sculpture." And she's like, "Nope, I still feel it," when she stands up. I thought that was a good line
That
too.
was a good one. I think I think Melody had like the best dialogue in this movie. Like everything she says, in my opinion, was iconic.
Yes, it again, it really echoes to me, like, it sounds a lot like, Amanda's character in Mean Girls, who, like, also has a lot of kind of one-liners that I think sometimes people forget that, like, it can be hard to play that character, and make it funny. It's really good comedic timing, and chemistry with the other actors. I think she did a good job. And since we talked about Parker Posey, I guess the other thing I was going to mention too, like, it's just always fun seeing Alan Cumming. This is, like I said earlier, a few years after, I think 2 or 3 years after Romy and Michelle's high school reunion, which is like one of my favorite movies ever.
One of my favorites too. We were talking
Yeah,
about
and I love his role in that. I feel like this is kind of similar. It's like kind of goofy and but sweet, and um this is before he was Nightcrawler, and so it's just interesting, like
it.
he's had such an
It's so
interesting
funny, and
career.
it's so funny you mentioned it earlier that the whole music movies is like the whole music movies are a craze, and he actually played in one of my other favorite music movies. I know you've probably seen Spice World. Please tell me you have.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said that.
He played. I totally
I thought about that movie watching this too.
a light bulb just went
I
off
didn't
in
know
my
he was
head.
in that.
A light bulb went off in my head when I thought about that. I'm like, wait a minute, he was in another music movie, and I can't think of which one. But when we were talking, I'm like, wait a minute, how can I not forget? How can I not remember that he was in Spice World? He was one of the press people that was following them around the whole movie, harassing them.
I did not remember that, but I saw Spice World in theaters. I was obsessed with the Spice Girls. Wow, I did not remember that. That's so great.
So speaking of which, I'm looking like we have to talk. We have to briefly touch on this soundtrack of this movie.
Go for it.
How awesome was this soundtrack though? I'm looking like I said, it's something that I listen to even to this day. In fact, I think I was like running yesterday, and I think one of the songs from the end of the movie came on. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so great.
Do you have some favorite tracks on it?
I think the opening, I think the opening track, the Three Small Words song, has to be my favorite. But I'm like tired. I'm like at a tie with the ending song, "Spin Around," which that was a good one because that's like when I talk about my other favorite scene in the movie, is there has to be the ending scene where the audience is not finally brainwashed and they actually judging it on their own and they actually like it and everything. I just thought that was a full circle moment, like them singing that song and then just the audience just being so receptive to it on their own without being brainwashed, which is.
Yeah, like having faith in like the music itself and not having to sell something else.
I
Um
also have to admit that I find myself singing "Backdoor Lover" every now and then. I mean, it's kind of catchy.
uh,
I can't lie.
there you go. At the end of the movie too, I like when she's talking to her boyfriend and they have like this, again, I feel like this movie is a little bit of a parody on other teen movies of the time, maybe even on Can't Hardly Wait. And there's like a little bit of humor to it. So she's like trying to talk to him in the audience and he's trying to talk back. It's like kind of goofy but sweet, and I'm like, I just think it's funny cuz that ending scene is very similar to a lot of other teen movies that came out at that same time too.
Yeah,
But it's like the movie kind of rides the line of kind of being a parody of some other teen movies, but in a kind of subverted way, and funny, so it does a good job at that, I think.
and yeah, it does a good job of that, and it also does a good job of the whole advertising thing. Like, fun fact for me is I was actually a marketing major in college, so it's like crazy.
Oh.
So it's crazy to like have watched this movie like 11 years before I was in college actually studying this, and then like fast forward 11 years later, I'm actually in college studying stuff like product placement and how important it is and subliminal messaging. I'm looking like it's just
Oh, that's ironic.
it's so ironic how things just come back to you in your life, and then you just think about stuff like the time where I the life was simpler, and I'm watching this movie, and now I'm learning about this stuff.
I also like in this film that, so like there, the big dark plot that's happening at the same time is Parker Posey's character and Alan's character. They're working like with the government. I mean, like the Pentagon is involved in this idea of like brainwashing teens into buying all these products. And that's kind of similar to at least the cartoon. I don't know if it's the same in the comics, but there's always like some grand, bigger, you know, bad guy. Like the episode that I watched last night of Josie and the Pussycats, there was like a submarine with this evil looking dude and his little crew, and they had to stop him. And Nick was telling me that all of the cartoons kind of followed like the Scooby Doo model, where it's like there's a group of kids and they're like solving a mystery, and then there's like a big bad guy. And in this movie, they're kind of it's the same thing. There's like a bigger overall plot. They have to like figure it out. So it knowing that, it kind of made the plot of the movie make more sense to me too. Like realizing that there was like a parallel, at least in the '70s show.
Yeah, I think it did actually kind of take on elements of the show a little bit, with as far as like the whole darkness of the movie and all that. Like it
Hmm.
was a subplot to the movie, which I think connected
Yeah,
to the cartoon, which kind of intertwined it, in my opinion.
yeah, yeah. Well, were there any other scenes you wanted to touch on?
No, but I would like to like point out this like quick fact that
Oh, go for it.
even I just didn't find out like until like I think I was talking to a friend of mine like a month ago when we were talking about this movie, and like the 20th anniversary is coming up next week. But they were actually considering for the role of Valerie before they considered Rosario Dawson. They actually considering three popular singers at the time,
Hmm.
and two of them actually auditioned, and it was Beyonce of Destiny's Child at the time. It was it
Wow.
was Aaliyah right before she passed actually,
Ugh.
and it was Left Eye of TLC. They were gonna just give the role to Left Eye because they thought she was right for it, but Aaliyah and Beyonce actually auditioned, and they, according to the directors, from what I read, Aaliyah was like really soft and sweet with the role, and Beyonce was too shy.
Hard to imagine Beyonce being shy, huh? Different time.
Right,
Like, I
it's
mean, you know,
crazy.
not that she's like too bold or anything, but she's Beyonce.
That
Like, but
that's like really insane.
man, and Aaliyah and Lisa Lopez, they're no longer with us. That's crazy.
Yeah, like I said, they
Uh,
were actually considering, from what I read, they were actually just considering giving Left Eye the role because they she didn't even have to audition. I don't know if it was because
I mean,
I don't know if it's because she died later on or what. I don't know if they I don't.
yeah, it looks like she died in '02, and this movie came out in '01, so it's like right
But
before she
I think
died.
it was actually some time. I think it was actually during that time where TLC was having a little bit of drama too. So I don't know what stopped. So I
Oh.
don't know what stopped it, but it would have been interesting to see. I think it would have been interesting to see her on the road. I think it would have been.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, especially given what happened, but man, TLC was so huge also during that time. I loved TLC.
TLC isn't, and it's so crazy because I think TLC actually gets a mention in the movie when she was trying when Alan Cummings' character was trying to tell Fiona what he found. And I think he said like TLC times three, except one of them was two of them like incredibly like light skinned or something.
Oh yeah, okay, I do remember that line.
So yeah,
Yeah, I wonder if they wrote that because they had her in mind. But wow. Yeah, I mean, you know, probably acting wise, Rosario Dawson is probably the best pick, but it would have been interesting to see a music icon. Cause yeah, Destiny's Child. I mean, that was around that time too, right?
that would yeah that
God.
I think that would actually been a good publicity stunt for Destiny's
Yeah,
Child at the time.
1990 to
Yeah,
2006.
I
Sometimes you forget like
yeah
how long Destiny's Child was actually around
yeah
for.
I think it
Wow.
would have been like a good like marketing thing for them if they would have had it. But I think that's when Beyonce just started acting because I remember seeing her in the Fighting Temptations, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm.
So
And I know she was in the that Austin Powers
yeah,
movie
that
too.
might have been around the same time. But like I said, all these movies intertwine, and I just forget the time sometimes. But I just thought that was like a really good fact that they were
Yeah.
actually considering a singer for the role.
Yeah, that would have been huge. And like yeah, I remember when she was in the third Austin Powers movie, she did come off as like very sweet.
She
and
did.
like not
I
shy, but
remember.
like just very like girl next door. I mean, obviously she's like gorgeous. And that was actually 2002, yeah. But she's just comes off like very very sweet in that movie. I think her name was, oh yeah, Foxy
Foxy
Cleopatra.
Cleopatra. I remember that.
Yeah. Man, that's a really good fact. I like that.
And
That's
then
interesting.
I think the other interesting fact about this movie was that she was like Rachel A. Cook was actually kind of surprised they casted her at the time because she was basically one of the ones that was actually given the role too. But she said she couldn't sing and she didn't know how to play a guitar, so she was really surprised they gave her the role.
I have to tell you, that did not matter in 2001. I felt like they always casted acting over being able to perform. Like dubbing somebody else in to sing, not a problem.
But
But I guess just her star power at the time
she
is
was
probably
actually
why
one,
they
but
casted her.
I think it was actually because of her star power, but it was actually because of the time. I remember in an interview she said she actually auditioned for Can't Hardly Wait, so that probably has something to do with it too.
Oh, Jennifer Love Hewitt's in that movie, and she's another like I don't know what it was around this time. Like all the like main leading women were like 5'1" or something. I'm 5'1", but I just remember that because I'm very short, and I would get very excited anytime like a leading female character was short. I was like, oh, good, the shorties are getting a role. But I remember like they're both kind of small ladies. I think.
Yeah, Rachel A. Cook is actually really short. I met her at a Comic Con like a couple of years ago.
Oh, really?
She's incredibly short, but
Yeah, and I think Jennifer Love Hewitt is too. I feel like she's kind of small
but yeah,
too, but yeah.
Rachel's like really actually really sweet in person. Like she
Oh,
was like totally nice, and
oh, that's
she
awesome.
enjoyed somebody actually remembering Josie and the Pussycats. She said she hadn't had nobody talk to her the whole weekend about it. So I think I made her. I
Really?
think I really made her day that day when I met her.
Oh, that's so nice when that happens. I have a similar story like that where I met Wesley from Star Trek, Will Wheaton, and I was in I think I was like a teenager, but like very young. And I came up to him and I said that, he's used to people saying, "Oh, you're Wesley from Star Trek." And I was like, "Oh, I really loved you in Stand By Me." And he got like so excited he gave me a hug. That somebody remembered him from that role. He was
Right,
super young in that role, but
right.
yeah, it's nice when you can bring up something that's like near and dear to their heart, and not just, because they probably hear the same movie all the time. So it's last year maybe, the Comic-Con here, there was a lot of people from like Boy Meets World, and like I've just been noticing like the some of those shows from back when and movies are kind of making the rounds now, so
Yeah,
a lot of nostalgia.
I feel like it's like a lot of nostalgia because the shows are like turning almost 20 years old now. So it's like
Mhm.
it's people our age that wants to go and meet them now. So hey, I guess they got to get a paycheck some kind of way if they're not working.
For sure. um well, okay, so did you get all your facts in too? Want to
I,
make sure I'm not rushing you.
I think I actually got all my facts in that I want to actually say about this movie. Yeah, I think
Okay. Well, that brings me to my last couple of questions for you as we're wrapping up here. Number one, uh, why do you? I know we talked about why you love this movie so much, but if you had to summarize it, why do you think you've seen this movie so many times? Why do you keep coming back to it?
you know what. When I first saw the movie, like I was excited that it was gonna like be a live adaptation of like something that was associated with something that was near and dear to my heart, which is Archie comics. So that's what got me excited about the movie initially. And then I tell my friends this all the time, even before Riverdale premiered. I feel like I was one of the sole people that spoke Riverdale into existence because of my obsession with this movie. I will take credit for that. I don't care if anybody doesn't ever give me credit for it. I will give myself credit for that because every day since 2001, when this movie came out, I said there will be some kind of live adaptation of Archie, the actual Archie comics with the Archie comic characters, and it will be because of this movie. 16 years later, I got it, and I feel like I was the reason. I would give myself credit on that one, and that's what keeps me coming back to this movie because whenever I watch this movie, I think about that. My persistence is what spoke Riverdale into existence.
I'll give you that credit, and I say this as somebody that has a Riverdale cheerleader uniform in my closet, and also I have the jacket, a serpent's jacket. So, kudos to you. Thank you
I
for your
have, I
service.
have, I have very much the same kind of Riverdale stuff in my closet right now. Like I said,
I have Jughead's beanie somewhere too.
we just got through shooting some new content for the page on Instagram,
Oh, cool.
and I will just give you an exclusive hint just for this podcast. So this is exclusive just for you. Nobody else has ever heard this, so I'm going to tell you. Um, I just got through rinsing my hair off because it was red. So just an exclusive,
Okay.
just for this podcast, that was an exclusive. So y'all got the scoop. You heard it here first.
Yay! She's one of my favorite characters, so
Right,
can't wait to see it.
right.
I don't feel like I can really pull off any of the characters, so I think I wanted to do sort of like a just like a serpent girl, maybe with some like hoop earrings and like I'll put it together someday, but I haven't done anything for it yet. I just wear the stuff casually. Usually like when I'm not cosplaying, I'll walk around at a con with the jacket or something.
That's what I do.
But I love that show too.
I went along. I went along. I had the Archie. I had Archie jacket on as my winter coat.
Oh, nice.
So like I said, what keeps me coming back to this movie is because I feel like because of this movie, Riverdale exists, and I feel like
There you go.
I had an integral part in that. So whenever I watch this movie now that Riverdale's been on for a while, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe 2001 this movie came out, and years later I got my wish to keep the Archie comic live adaptation coming.
Yes. You just needed some patience, I guess. But it came.
I just had to keep hoping and wishing.
There you go. Well, my other question for you is like what would your elevator pitch for this movie be? Like how would you like to someone that's never seen it before, how do you get them interested in this film?
I say if you like music, movie, comedies, I say this is the first film I actually recommend anybody to watch. Like because it's a, it's a tight soundtrack. It's a cool storyline. It has product placement for God's sake. And anybody my age, I would totally recommend this movie for because you're gonna just have a nostalgic trip just watching this movie. And even if it's your first time watching it, you're gonna just instantly love it because of all the elements of nostalgia that's in this movie. It's just gonna take you back to a place where you had no worries and life was a simpler time. And I think that's what we need right now, especially with everything that's happening. I think we just need to go back to that simpler time, and even if it's for 98 minutes, hey, it makes us happy.
I'm gonna agree with you there. I felt very nostalgic watching this movie last night, and it put me in a good mood. So 100%. Um, well, Corey, thank you so much for taking time out to be on the show. I'm honored that you picked my show to be a first podcast guest on, and I hope that you continue to work on your podcast and let us know when you get it off the ground so we can plug it and everything. I look forward to seeing what you produce.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope you have me again. It's
Absolutely.
other movies I would love to talk to you about and to share with everybody else. This is really fun. I really appreciate you having me. This was a great
For
experience.
sure. Yes, you definitely have to come back. This was really fun. And thank you for coming on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.